All right, here come some folks now. Welcome in, everybody. While we wait for more folks to join us, if you wouldn't mind, along the bottom of your Zoom window, jumping in the chat and telling us your name and where you're calling in from, just to kind of get the conversation started. We like to make these webinars as interactive as possible. So getting that conversation started early is always much appreciated. Go. Welcome. Wayne, thanks for joining us. Thanks for getting the chat started. And a note for folks, as you're chatting, there's a drop down above the chat window that is probably defaulting to hosts and panelists. If you could change that to everyone, that way everyone can see your comments and you can interact with each other. We've got Camila Walker joining us from Chapel Hill. Welcome, welcome. And Wayne is joining us from the Florida Division of Blind Services. Awesome, Wayne. Great to have you with us. All right, we've got some more folks joining. For anyone who missed it at the top of the hour, I asked if you could, on the bottom of your Zoom window, click the chat function and just type your name and where you're joining us from. We've got Steve Padgett from Cleveland Community College in Shelby, North Carolina. Funny enough, Steve, Gary and I are in the Cleveland area of Ohio, so that's funny. We've got Sylvia Scott joining us from Colorado. Hi, Sylvia. Okay, we'll just give it another minute or two to let more folks pile in here, and then we'll kick things off. Shelly, hello, our favorite from Kansas.
And Siobhan's one of my dear friends from Victor Valley College. I'm really happy.
Welcome, Siobhan. Welcome. Glad to have you with us. Glad to have all of you with us.
Miami, yeah, Asheville, North Carolina.
Awesome. Great. Kind of some good representation from all over the country. All right. I guess I'll get things started by introducing myself. I am Nick Hool. I'm the Director of Client Engagement here at the Entrepreneurial Learning Initiative, and I'll be kind of the MC point person for today's event, being hosted and run by our illustrious founder, Gary Schoeniger here. Couple ground rules, so some expectation setting. We like I said before, we like to make this as engaging as possible. So if folks want to ask questions, make comments, anything like that, feel free to do that in the chat or the Q&A at any time. We'll stop in the middle and then again at the end for some Q&A about the various topics, including mindset, entrepreneurship, and everything in between. As you probably heard when you were joining, we are recording this. So within 24 hours at the end of the session, we'll send the recording, the slides, and a couple other helpful links as well. So no worries about furiously taking notes or anything of that nature. Just to say hi to a few more folks. We've got Sue from Fort Lauderdale, Kelly from the Young Entrepreneur Institute in Cleveland. Hi, Kelly. We love working with you all over there at the Young Entrepreneur Institute. We have been working with the Inspire folks for a while, so it's awesome to have you here with us. Jen from Junior Achievement in North Central Ohio. Great. Welcome, Jen. And Ernestine. Hey, great to see you, Ernestine. We've had you with us on several of these, so it's great to have you with us again. All right.
Ernestine is from the UK. It's probably 5, 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock in the evening in UK.
Thank you for the commitment. Yes.
Yeah. Now we've got here from Zinab Mama from Morocco. Wow. Welcome.
Great. Welcome.
Yep.
Awesome.
Great. African Business School. Love it. Love it.
Fantastic. Well, hey, just paying attention to time here, Gary, did I miss anything, or are you ready to rock and roll?
No. I think that we covered, we'll try to make this interactive and we'll have a couple pauses for you guys. I'm going to kind of put together 2 concepts, have you hopefully, if you got questions, whatever, we want this to be interactive and a little less didactic if possible. So I'm counting on you guys to kind of jump in and provide your input, feedback, comments, suggestions, what have you. All right, let's dive in, Nick. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and try to do this as seamlessly as possible. Can you see my screen okay, Nick? That's all
Yes,
good?
sir. Yep.
Perfect. So welcome, everyone. My name is Gary Schoeniger. I'm the founder of the Entrepreneurial Learning Initiative. We are the world's leading provider of entrepreneurial mindset education, training, and professional development. We work with individuals, organizations, classrooms all over the world. I'm really delighted to share with you some of what we've learned about the entrepreneurial mindsets, what it is, where it comes from, how to cultivate it in ourselves, in others, specifically in classrooms, organizations, and communities. And I think one way to think about this is, there's a theoretical framework, then there's the practical application, and then the idea is to diffuse these ideas out in the world to bring about, a more wide scale change. So this work arose as the result of a lifelong obsession with this single question, which is, how do underdogs win? How do ordinary people who have no particular advantage in life manage to carve out some modicum of meaning and prosperity in their life? How do they identify opportunities the rest of us overlook? How do they alter their place in the socioeconomic structure in spite of their lack of access to resources and power and privilege and such? And that's really the question I've been trying to answer for more than 30 years. A lot of the, just to back up a minute, in 2008, I did a research project for the Cisco Entrepreneur Institute. And one of the findings in that research was that the way entrepreneurship is typically portrayed in the classroom is largely divorced from the reality of what a typical entrepreneurial person is doing. And in that project, I was given the opportunity to interview hundreds and hundreds of everyday entrepreneurs. That's how I met Clifton Talbert and my co-author. We wrote this book, Who Owns the Ice House? 8 Life Lessons from an Unlikely Entrepreneur. These 8 life lessons are concepts that arose again and again and again, that were distilled from hundreds of interviews, and they're told through the lens of Clifton's life journey. We used his story as a vehicle to kind of help people understand the basic concepts here. And that became the basis of the Ice House Entrepreneurship Program. Now, what I want to say here is, I want this webinar to be useful to you, whether or not you decide to use our curriculum. I mean, I want you to take away something from this. So hopefully at the end of this hour, this time has been well spent. With that said, I hope to convince you that we have a very, very powerful curriculum, and there's so there's much more depth to it than I can even possibly cover in this webinar, but God knows I'm going to try. So the big idea here is that the world has changed in ways that now require all of us to be more innovative and entrepreneurial. We're living in what people call a VUCA world, which is an acronym for volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. And the mindset and the methods that once enabled us to succeed within highly stable environments are now becoming maladaptive in this world of change. That's really the big idea. And so one of the things we're doing in our work is juxtaposing the entrepreneurial mindset against the managerial mindset. And the recognition is that we need both, that we need, but these the opportunities to develop these entrepreneurial attitudes and skills, competencies, if you will, which are the competencies that employers now demand, that the world now demands, are largely absent from the curriculum, and that's a big problem we've got to solve. So, no one will just dispute this idea that entrepreneurial activity is essential for creating vibrant, equitable, and resilient communities. Like, we all understand that, the importance of entrepreneurship for creating vibrancy and vibrant, equitable, and resilient communities. The problem is that entrepreneurship in general is still shrouded in myth and misperception and common myths that prevent us from embracing it. And some of that I'd like to touch base on in a minute. But the point that I want to make is that an entrepreneurial mindset essentially makes us future-proof. And when we look at entrepreneurial people, and that I'm using the term entrepreneurials because I mean to say that you don't need to own a business to be entrepreneurial, and I'll get to that and dig into that in a bit. But when we look at entrepreneurial people, what we see are people who are highly resilient and resourceful. These are people that have the cognitive dexterity to be able to identify and solve problems amidst complexity and change. When the rules aren't clear, when the path isn't clear, when the rules are not known and the outcomes are not assured. And because of these abilities, there's unlimited demand for people who can think like entrepreneurs. Again, these are the attitudes and skills employers demand. These are the attitudes and skills the world now demands. So what I want to talk about today is three things here, the questions I'd like to address. What is an entrepreneurial mindset? Where does it come from? And how can we develop it in ourselves and others? That really gets to our work. That's what the work at the Entrepreneurial Learning Initiative is all about. We've trained thousands of educators and organizational leaders across the globe on how to cultivate entrepreneurial mindsets in organizations, in classrooms, all over the world. That's what we do. So in order to answer those two questions, I want to connect two important ideas. The first is, let's dig in for a minute to the word mindset. We throw that word around without really understanding what it means. And the definition, there aren't really any real clinical definitions of mindset. And I think we've been able to make some progress there. The second idea is entrepreneurship as a means of optimizing engagement and unlocking potential. And so there, what I'm trying to impress upon you is that we have to think of entrepreneurship more broadly than just a startup discipline. We've got to stop thinking of entrepreneurship in binary terms. Either are or you're not. You're either going to be an entrepreneur or you're going to be a traditional employee. We have to kind of diffuse these ideas more broadly beyond startup. So let's start with mindset, okay? We all have a mindset, yet very few of us are aware of it, much less the ways in which it influences our behavior without our awareness. So our mindset works like this. Let me back up for a second. Our mindset is, the mindset is to a person what culture is to a group. And now that gives us a framework for understanding a mindset. You could put it differently and you can say that culture is our collective mindset, or our mindset is our individual culture. It enables us to think without thinking and function without really thinking. So this is from the work of Edgar Schein, the iceberg model. On the surface are the visible artifacts and observable behaviors. This is what we can see and touch and hear. This is the outcome. Beneath the surface lies our explicit knowledge and our espoused values. This is what we know that we know and what we say that we value. But what the study of culture has taught us /mindset is that what shows up on the surface is much more likely to be the result of our deeply held values and taken for granted assumptions of which we are largely unaware. That's how culture functions, and that's how a mindset functions. And so our understanding of culture You can look at the literature around culture, and you can replace the word culture with mindset, and you get the same basic framework. So building on or adapting from Edgar Schein's definition of culture, I'm defining mindset as a pattern of basic assumptions and mental models learned by an individual that has worked well enough to be considered valid and therefore assumed to be the correct way to perceive, think, and feel in relation to a particular problem or the pursuit of a particular goal. I know it's a little bit clunky, but it's very, very precise. So in our world, when we talk about a mindset, we talk about these 5 core dimensions of a mindset. The first is our perceived locus of control. Do we believe we're in control of our destiny, or that fate, luck, circumstances control our destiny? Are we intrinsically motivated or extrinsically motivated? Are we doing something for purpose, or are we doing it for a separable reward, like a letter grade or $1 or praise from someone else? Makes an enormous difference in our ability to persist in the face of difficulties. Do we have a fixed or a growth orientation in regard to our own innate ability? Do we have an optimistic or a pessimistic outlook, what psychologists would call a optimistic or a pessimistic explanatory style? And really the overarching idea here is perceived self-efficacy. Like, do we have high self-efficacy, meaning we set high goals for ourselves and we stick to those goals in the face of challenge? Or do we have a low sense of self-efficacy in which we set low goals for ourselves and we give up easily in the face of challenge? So these are some dimensions of a mindset. And as you can see, these are ideas that, we don't walk around saying, hi, my name's Gary. I have an external locus of control. There are things we're not necessarily conscious of, but these things have an enormous impact on our behavior. And so that's just sort of a quick overview of mindset. And there's so much more to unpack. I'm working on a new book. It should be out next year, Mindset 2.0, that really gets into this. And I think, this might come as a bit of this might seem a little bit counterintuitive or paradoxical, but I think our work is 99% mindset and it's 1% entrepreneurship. And the idea there is that, we want to help the learner understand that you are looking at the world through a lens, that a mindset is a belief system that is perfectly designed to create the outcomes it's creating. So let's look at your level 1 outcomes, and then let's try to bring your level 3 beliefs, values, and assumptions up to level 2. And once we've done that, then let's compare them to the beliefs and values and assumptions of an entrepreneurial mindset. And then you can adapt as you see fit. That's kind of how I think about it. Love to hear your thoughts on that. So now let me talk about entrepreneurship, and let me sort of redefine entrepreneurship. The challenge I have is that the word entrepreneur arose at the dawn of the Industrial Revolution in the 18th century and hasn't changed much. And when you look up the word entrepreneur or entrepreneurship, it'll tell you, well, somebody who takes a risk in exchange for a profit. I got to tell you, I haven't really seen that. That implies that the entrepreneur is a risk taker. The data does not support that, and I'm happy to discuss that with you. And it also implies that the entrepreneur is strictly profit-driven. And I've not seen that. I've interviewed, close to 600 entrepreneurs over the last 10 or 12 years. And there's almost always a purpose-driven motive. Profit's important. I'm not trying to diminish that, but there's other motives. All this is to say is that the current definition of entrepreneurship are either antiquated, they're outdated, they're misleading. And so, one of the points that I like to make in our training is that, our ability to embrace it is skewed by the vision of the uber entrepreneur. What do we call this? The apex fallacy. right? We look at these Mark Zuckerberg's, Elon Musk, Richard Branson, Jeff Bezos types, and we think that's what an entrepreneur is. And I'm not here to denigrate Jeff Bezos or Elon Musk. What I'm saying is these types represent, a tiny, tiny, tiny infinitesimal fraction of entrepreneurial activity. And so these images of entrepreneurs and these programs that promote the venture-backed high growth model of entrepreneurship are exclusive. And they skew our thinking about how to be entrepreneurial. They skew our thinking about who can be entrepreneurial. And so that's all I'll really say about that. It's just like, it just changes our thinking about entrepreneurship. So, and this took me a long time to figure this out, but I finally landed on this description of entrepreneurship as the self-directed pursuit of opportunities to create value for others. And by creating value for others, we empower ourselves. Now, I'm just going to unpack that for 1 minute. The reason I like this is because anyone can embrace this in any role, in any situation. This definition is situation independent, it's resource independent, it's IQ independent, right? You can have a minimum wage job in a fast food restaurant, and yet if you're buying into the idea that it's up to me to figure out how to make myself as useful as possible in this situation, you're almost guaranteed to grow and develop and advance in your life. And so therefore, by creating value for others, we empower ourselves. Not only do we become empowered from an economic perspective, as my friend Tom Rue likes to say, we become emancipated. It's like economic emancipation, but we tap into this really, really potent form of motivation called intrinsic motivation. We become optimally engaged, and therefore we tend to experience greater psychological well-being. So it's kind of a win-win situation, but the big idea here is this is a definition that anyone can embrace in any situation, in any job. It's not about starting a business. It's about figuring out how to leverage your interest and your abilities in ways that contribute to something bigger than ourselves. So one way to think about this, right? And this is from Csikszentmihalyi's work in Flow, right? So the bottom left, we have our current reality. And out here is a compelling goal out in the distant future. And what we know from Csikszentmihalyi's work is that when we're in a situation where the challenge exceeds our skill level, we become very anxious and it's very difficult to function. When we're in a situation where our skill exceeds the challenge, we become bored and disengaged. Now, I like to point out that 2/3 of students leave high school not engaged in learning. And ironically, about the same percentage of workers in North America are not engaged in their work. And when you dig into this, what I'm saying here is that the vast majority of students and workers are just not engaged. And so when we look at entrepreneurial people, they tend to be optimally engaged. And I think the optimal engagement is a function of the compelling goal. It's the goal is acting on the individual. It has nothing to do with their traits. It has everything to do with the nature of the goal they're pursuing, the autonomous pursuit of that goal. So it's just another way to think about it. I like to use this phrase from Bruce Lee, in which he said that the successful warrior is nothing more than a common man with a laser focus. And I'm saying that that laser focus is the result of a compelling goal. in other words, the only thing that distinguishes the entrepreneur from the non-entrepreneur is a compelling goal. So with all that said, what I'm saying is what we tend to see in entrepreneurial people is an internal locus of control, right? We tend to see that they are typically intrinsically motivated. And to be intrinsically motivated gives you an enormous advantage over someone who has equal or greater capabilities. It's the intrinsic motivation is like rocket fuel. It really gives the individual an enormous advantage over people who are extrinsically motivated. We tend to see a growth orientation. I can figure out whatever I need to figure out in order to get where I want to go. We also tend to see an optimistic outlook, right? And that, again, is happening in part. Part of it is hereditary, but a tremendous amount of it is the belief that the future will be better than the present, coupled with the belief that I have the power to make it so. And that's, I forgot the guy's name now, Hope Monger, a researcher from Gallup who described, that was his definition of active hope. The belief that the future will be better than the present, coupled with the belief that I have the power to make it so. And lastly, we tend to see a high degree of self-efficacy beliefs, right? We're confident, we set high goals for ourselves, we don't give up, we persevere, we look at challenges as obstacles to be overcome rather than defeat. The point that I really want to draw away from this is that the entrepreneurial mindset is an effect, it's not the cause. The desire towards growth and self-actualization is in everyone. The entrepreneurial mindset is an effect of the pursuit of a compelling goal. So I'm just going to stop there. There's so much more to unpack there. I just want to stop and give you guys a chance to breathe and process some of this. I'd love to know what your questions and comments are. Specifically, has this changed your thinking about mindset or entrepreneurship more broadly?
We've got some good comments. A good first comment is from Camellia, mindset as a belief system. That's a great t-shirt. I like that. And then Lisa asked us, how would you recommend I explain in simple terms to a parent the benefits and need to learn an entrepreneurial mindset starting in an elementary education?
Wow, that's such a good question. That's such a good question. And, I'm working on this very chapter in my new book right now. So your timing could not be better.
Exactly.
And here's some things I would say about that. It's such a good question. It's not about teaching startup. It's not about starting up. It's about standing out. This is like entrepreneurial attitudes and skills will give a young person an extraordinary competitive advantage in a world that's trying to make everyone else, that's trying to make us all the same, only better than everyone else. And so it's really about teaching, it's about cultivating the attitudes and skills of resilience and self-direction, and better enabling the child to adapt and thrive in a rapidly changing world. I'm probably throwing too much at you there, but it's really about resilience, adaptability, building children who are future-proof. That's what it's really about. And yeah, if that didn't get it for you, I'm happy to, add on to that.
Sure. Any other questions? I'm just scrolling back in the chat. It looks like we might have had a few people join us after my opening spiel. So just as a reminder, we will be sharing the recording as well as the slides tomorrow, probably morning or early afternoon. Okay, we've got one here. Given your definition of solving a problem that benefits others, would you say that having an entrepreneurial mindset is devoid of selfishness / self-interest / ego?
I wouldn't say devoid, but I would say that empathy is perhaps the most important aspect of opportunity recognition. So I think you're asking the right question, Mahilani, I hope I didn't butcher your name too badly. You're asking the right question. It gets to the idea that, and I think it's quite natural, and scholars throughout the last couple centuries have written about this, including Karl Marx, right? That this is sort of a natural way well, let me start with Aristotle, right? So Aristotle wrote about the pleasurable life is when we seek pleasure, of course, and we need pleasure and recreation. There's nothing wrong with that, but that's when our focus is solely on that, problems arise. The good life happens when we use our strengths and our virtues, let's say, to enrich ourselves and our families, and that's the good life. But the meaningful life occurs when we figure out how to pursue our interests and cultivate our abilities in ways that contribute to the greater good. That's the thank you, Nick, that article I wrote about the entrepreneurship as an altruistic paradox. That's good, Nick. You're on top of it. Thank you. Mm-hmm. Great question, Mahilani. Thank you.
Zinib asked, how can we measure the impact of entrepreneurial education? Any longitudinal approach, pre-post evaluation, controlled group evaluation? Yeah, good question.
Yeah, there are lots of psychometrics out there. We work with EMP, the folks at EMP, and maybe Nick, you can throw a link in there, that have developed a pretty robust psychometric tool to measure the entrepreneurial mindset. I know there are other psychometric tools out there for measuring things like self-efficacy beliefs, locus of control, optimism versus pessimism. Those things are out there. I've also seen research, I can't think of the guy's name, he was at Florida State maybe 20 years ago, but it showed that students who had entrepreneurship education, had taken an entrepreneurship course in high school, all their other academic achievement scores tended to go up. And we've seen this again. And I think, Zinab, your question gets at a big idea, and that is that entrepreneurial discovery learning creates a very powerful incentive to learn. That's the real takeaway for this. It shifts the locus of control from the teacher to the learner, and it's more reflective of the ways that hunter-gatherer children have learned for more than 95% of the time we've occupied the earth, and which is to say through experimentation and play and observation rather than through formal instruction.
Nice.
It's a
great,
great question.
Yeah, it is definitely some really good ones this time. One more question, then I think in interest of time, we'll move on from this. But Carolyn is asking, or is saying, for me, the entrepreneurial mindset is being aligned with your why. Whether you're working 100%. In an organization or a business owner. Organizations including schools, need to be tying in the why into their curriculum.
Yeah, such a great point, Carolyn. It's really personalized learning is what you're talking about, as opposed to just like socialized learning, right? It's I just read a fantastic book called Dark Horse from a Harvard lecturer, Todd Rose, which I highly recommend, in which he's saying like the age of standardization is over. And we have to stop encouraging students to compete with artificial intelligence, stop encouraging students to be just like everybody else, only better. Like that's a fool's errand. But
I'll post a link to that book in the chat too.
Yeah. And Carol and I, in my new book, I'm laying out what I call a 4-stage framework for teaching entrepreneurship. And it start with why, like, what is it you want to have happen? What's important to you? And again, back to my compelling goal theory. It goes back to what Nietzsche has famously said, that he who has a strong why to live can endure almost any how. And that's really the idea nested in there. So thank you for that comment, Carolyn.
Okay, looking at time, let's
keep rolling.
Rolling. Yeah, definitely.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you, Nick.
Mm-hmm.
Let me see how to make all this stuff go away here. Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about the Icehouse Entrepreneurship Program now, and how how it works, right? I hope I didn't get too far ahead of myself here, did I? Whoops, it's going backwards. All right, no, I didn't. Sorry. So I'm going to get a little bit into the Icehouse program. Just a quick overview. There are 4 now current editions of the Icehouse program, starting with the original, which is really broad and general. There is a student success version, which has been used very successfully as like, a senior, high school, senior, college, freshman student success type course, just to help students understand how to embrace an entrepreneurial mindset to succeed in school and in life more broadly. There's a small business edition, which is really sort of adapted to people who have opted in, want to start a business. This is very effective for small business development centers. And a few years ago, through a pilot with a nonprofit, it escapes me, Nick, help me out here, in Erie, Pennsylvania, we developed a middle school version after they put a couple thousand kids. Thank you, Nick. The United Way funded a pilot project for about 800 or 1,000 kids. And the impact of that was so profound that we worked with and hired some of those teachers and kind of broke apart the Icehouse program and put it back together in a way that's appropriate for middle schoolers as well. So here's how the basic framework of the Icehouse program, here's how it works. We introduce these 8 core concepts, the 8 life lessons. We immerse, that's basically the theory. Then we immerse the student in the opportunity discovery process, which is another way for saying the entrepreneurial process, right? They're looking for ways to make themselves useful outside of known systems without the benefit of a predetermined pathway and a predictable outcome. We also expose them to relatable social models, and that's really a big key to the success of Icehouse program. Unless you're teaching at Stanford, try to use less examples of Richard Branson and Jeff Bezos and try to expose the students to people who came from similar or worse circumstances. We also encourage personal reflection, right? We always want the student to be connecting their level 1 outcomes with their level 3 beliefs and values and assumptions. We do that through personal reflection. And lastly, we encourage facilitation rather than instruction. You can't teach entrepreneurship with the same mindset and tool set that we teach in a traditional classroom. You've got to relinquish the role as subject matter expert. You don't need to be a subject matter expert, by the way. You're facilitating the discovery process, and what we've organized our our methodology in such a way that you start out as the instructor, talking about the 8 life lessons, but very quickly you're shifting the model from a hierarchical vertical model of knowledge transfer to a horizontal model where the student's learning on their own and you become a facilitator rather than an instructor. The main point I want you all to hear today is that you do not need to be a subject matter expert to be an effective teacher of this curriculum. In fact, some of our most prolific facilitators are people that couldn't spell the word entrepreneur when they first came to this. So anyway, the 8 core competencies, I'm going to whip through those very quickly. These are distilled from hundreds and hundreds of interviews with everyday entrepreneurs. What we were looking for are common and controllable factors that are resource independent, situation independent, IQ independent, right? And so here they are. I'm going to hit them very quickly here. The baseline here is the awareness that we have choice. And that's connected to the compelling goal. And what we ask the learner to do, let me back up. What I hear in entrepreneurs almost invariably, very early in the interview, an articulation of a compelling goal, right? You can try this yourself. Find an entrepreneur. You probably know an entrepreneur. Like, what is it they're trying to make happen? It's the compelling goal. They're actually, what they don't realize they're doing is they're choosing their future rather than being captivated by the past. See, the nature of a mindset is that it draws from the past to determine the future. So the mindset becomes a mindset. It becomes a fixed way of thinking that draws from the past in order to create the future. And that's fine if you want the future to look like the past. But it causes all kinds of problems if you want the future to be different from the past. So the compelling goal enables us to tap into what psychologists call prospection, to imagine a different future rather than just allowing what's happened in the past to determine the future. There's so much I want to unpack there. I don't have time for it today. That's really the foundation of it all. I mean, this is where we ask the learner to start undertaking like an exercise in psychology is known like the best possible future, to write reflectively about what does your best possible future look like, to start orienting the brain towards a positive future. So what I'm trying to explain here is what we observed in entrepreneurs and how we translate that into the learning experience of Icehouse. Number 2, what we observe in entrepreneurs is they see problems as opportunities. It's really simple, but it's profound. Most of us learn, the division of labor has taught us this for the last 250 years. Not my problem, somebody else's problem. These are where the entrepreneur uses empathy, as we talked about a minute ago. They look for problems to be solved. They understand, at least at an intuitive level, by solving problems for others, I can empower myself. That's a really, really subtle, mostly unconscious cognitive shift that makes an extraordinary difference in the outcome of a human life. What we see in entrepreneurs is they're not writing business plans and doing market research. They're learning by trying. They're learning by doing. They're learning through a process of effectuation, which means you have to go in order to know. You can't predict. You have to try. And what we see in entrepreneurs is they're avid experimenters. It looks on the surface like random chaos or undisciplined chaos. But when you zoom out, they're actually more likely to be following like a scientific method, whereas they're trying lots of things on a small scale and learning from the results. Speaking of learning, what we also observe in entrepreneurial people is they're not always the best students, but they all seem to have in common this unusual desire to learn. And they also have the ability to learn and unlearn and relearn on their own. And the important point is here, they're not learning, they're not necessarily learning in a classroom through traditional means. Their learning is much more reflective of hunter-gatherer learning, right? They're foraging, they're learning from their peers, they're learning from adjacent others, they're learning from YouTube videos or audio books or peer groups. But the point is they're learning. And I would say, again, that's the belief that the future will be better, coupled with the belief that I have the power to make it so. What we also observe in entrepreneurs is they're very resourceful, and they tend to invest their discretionary time, thought, and effort in the advancement of their goals, rather than spending their discretionary time, effort, thought, ruminating or seeking a pleasure or in the pursuit of coping strategies, right? And it's really a really simple idea here that you know, if you believe that the future is better than the present, and you believe that you have the power to make it so, you're much more likely to invest. Whereas if you believe that there's nothing you can do about the future, the world is the way it is, and I am who I am, and there's nothing I can do about it, you're much more likely to spend your discretionary time, thought, effort, resources. Again, what I'm trying to do is connect the level 3 beliefs and assumptions to the level 1 outcomes. Building a brand. This is one of the most simple, most powerful lessons I've gleaned from observing these entrepreneurs. The vast majority of them are not inventors. They're doing something everyone else has already been done 1,000,000 times over. They're just delivering it very, very well. My wife just came back from a trip to Ann Arbor, Michigan, and she went to Zingerman's Deli. I don't know if any of you have ever been to Zingerman's Deli in Ann Arbor. Nick, I know you have. It's a delicatessen. But if you have to get there 20 minutes before, half an hour before they open, there's already a line out the door, because they just make really good sandwiches. And they know that people will pay a premium for that. The idea, the simple idea here we observed in entrepreneurs is they understand human needs beyond just the transactional level, and they understand more of the social and emotional dimensions of the needs. And when you understand human needs at that level, you can take an ordinary thing and make it into an extraordinary business by delivering an extraordinary service, by over-delivering and under-committing. That's what I see over and over in these entrepreneurs. We also see that they tend to create intentional support communities. And we have a really exciting new thing we're launching. I'm going to let Nick talk about it, but what we've created is we're about to launch an Icehouse learning community that's reflective of what we see in entrepreneurs. They tend to surround themselves with other entrepreneurial people. I don't know if you've ever studied the network effect, but your friends and your friends' friends and the friends of your friends' friends have an enormous impact on your behavior. The lesson here is be very, very, very careful about who you surround yourself with. That's what we see in entrepreneurs. And lastly, we see this incredible persistence. And again, I think this is tied to the compelling nature of the goal. It's all tied together here. And what this persistence is actually, it's actually coming from an optimistic explanatory style. Like, I refuse to give up. And that doesn't mean I'm just doing the same thing over and over and over again, but I keep learning, I keep failing, I keep getting back up, I'm taking responsibility, and I persist, and ultimately I prevail. So quick overview of the 8 life lessons. I could, spend an hour on each one of those lessons and still, not really get into it to do it justice. We then immerse the learner in the opportunity discovery process using this Icehouse opportunity discovery canvas. It basically breaks down the opportunity discovery process into 3 distinct phases. There's a problem finding phase, and that's where the empathy comes into play that we discussed earlier. And this is really about problem finding. It requires exploration, inquiry, observation. Then once we understand the problem, then we move into an experimental, we form a hypothesis and start testing the idea, looking for evidence of usefulness. And once we found evidence of usefulness in the second phase, then we move into the third phase, which is where we advocate for the idea, we execute on the idea and try to implement it more broadly. Phase 1 and 2 are iterative, evidence-based processes. We're looking for evidence of usefulness. And the point that I want to draw on here is in our observation of entrepreneurs, they're following this evidence-based process. And I'm trying to help folks understand and nudge folks away from what I call opinion-based entrepreneurship. The pitch competitions that have winners based on the opinion of the judges or whatever. I'm trying to say, opinions don't matter. It's like evidence and currency when people are buying an idea or they're buying into an idea. I don't care what the evidence is. My point is that it's an evidence-based process that more or less follows the scientific method, although you might scare the hell out of your students if you tell them that, but that's basically what we're teaching them, which is, on a side note, an ideal way to teach critical thinking. So the third component here is exposure to relatable social models. Throughout the Icehouse curriculum, the key learning concepts are reinforced with very short video vignettes from many of the entrepreneurs that we've interviewed to help reinforce the key concepts. And they're learning from people that have come from all manner of hardship and adversity and overcome those adversities by embracing these entrepreneurial ideas. Again, we encourage personal reflection, right? To encourage the student to constantly think about their own thinking. And one of the latest additions to this I would recommend for someone teaching entrepreneurship is to become well-versed in the art of Socratic questioning. There's no better method than to get people to think about their own thinking. That's really a very, very powerful tool. And then lastly, the facilitation rather than instruction. And much of this is based in Albert Bandura's guided mastery. And so what we're trying to do is shift the learner from a dependent or a helpless learner towards a more mastery, self-directed orientation. And Bandura laid out these 4 ideas to help move someone from a helplessness or a state of dependence to a state of mastery and self-direction. It starts with small wins. Got to feel the bat hit the ball once. Just build and build on small wins. Exposure to relatable social models. We've talked about that. We have to play the role of mentor or facilitator and guide rather than instructor. We're encouragers, we're coaches. We encouraging the behavior rather than telling the learner what to do. And then lastly, we include some tools to help self-regulate, to help the learner regulate, your own emotional response. Like, you can't just have a big, go into a doom loop every time something goes wrong. You got to learn to manage our emotional response. And we have some tools like in our training to help with that. So that's a quick overview of how the program works. I don't want to get too much into bragging mode here, but the Icehouse program has been, recognized around the world by the Papal Council for Peace and Justice at the Vatican, the United Nations, the European Commission, Kauffman Foundation recognized the Icehouse program as redefining entrepreneurship in classrooms and communities around the world. We've trained more than 3,200 facilitators on 5 continents. There's a live map on our website where you can connect with these facilitators. Here are some of the outcomes, just for example, some quick anecdotes from the middle school program in Erie, Pennsylvania. This is from a 12-year-old girl. If we all think about how we can change problems and opportunities, we can make Erie a better place. That's a 12-year-old girl saying that. The point I want to derive from her comment is that the desire to contribute is in all of us. It's not just in some of us. It's in there. Community college is probably our most prolific space where Icehouse has made the greatest impact. Specifically, the student success course has made this, community colleges, half the kids that show up in the first semester aren't there in the second semester. And we found in a blind study of about 1,000 students that the Icehouse program positively impacted their ability to persist at a rate of 28%. And Dr. Bolton said to me at one point, I thought it was 2.8%, which I would have been delighted with. He was shocked to see they had the analysts go back and recrunch the data. It was in fact 28% impact. Another impactful aspect of the program was in organizational development, and the work that's happening there is just nothing short of phenomenal. One case study here is in the city of Albuquerque, where 6,000 city government workers are now transforming the city government of Albuquerque with the Icehouse program. Also, workforce development, right? The skills gap, beneath the skills gap is a mindset gap. We're doing a lot of work with CareerSource Florida to help people reinvent themselves in the context of workforce development. It's been very, very successful there. More of a statewide economic development impact is happening through Ncid in North Carolina. It's led by Tom Rue, formerly of the Kauffman Foundation, who's committed to putting 100,000 North Carolinians through the Icehouse program. We're currently working with them and training facilitators from high schools, middle schools, colleges, nonprofit organizations across North Carolina. You want to learn more about that, there's a lot on our website. If you want to become a certified facilitator, our next public training starting in just a couple of weeks. I think we have a few seats left there. Nick can speak to that. That we have about 4 of these public trainings every year. Then, of course, we do trainings for organizations all over the world in between. These just allow an opportunity for people from a whole, across the world to come together to become certified in the Icehouse program. So I know I kind of went a little bit long there, Nick, and we're just about out of time. I'm happy to hang out for a couple extra minutes if you all have questions. Thank you so much for spending your time with us today. I'm just delighted to share some of what we learned with you, and hope you can grab onto this and make it your own.
Absolutely. I haven't seen any questions pile in, but there was a lot of asking for links to various case studies and things like that. So I just wanted to point everyone to that I shared several links about the work we've done in Erie, as well as places where you can find other blogs and things of that nature. So definitely take a look at that, and I'll make sure to include the chat with the links in the follow-up email. Just with the last minute that we have, I wanted to let everyone know about that community of practice, that community of learning that Gary mentioned briefly. We have started what's called a Discord server. If you've never heard of that, don't worry. It's a pretty straightforward process by clicking the link that I put in the chat that I'll also make sure to include in the follow-up email. It walks you through the process of setting up an account and joining our server. If you've ever used something like Slack, it's similar to that, or Microsoft Teams. It's similar to those, and it's a place for us to engage with each other more as peers than as sages on the stage, talking to our students, if you will. So it's a great place. We're just launching it, so bear with us as we have some growing pains and adapt it as we go. But
We're eating our own dog food.
We're eating our own dog food. Exactly. And the way Discord communities work is really fun because we've set up a place for people to go and share resources, share their stories. If you have a business idea and you want to find a mentor, we hope that we'll be able to facilitate some of that as well. But we build the community based on what everyone is doing, engaging in there. So it's a place where you can text and chat with people like a forum. And then we can also host hangouts, community hangouts, where we have more of a dialogue like we're doing right now via Zoom, but it would be via Discord. So look out for that link in the chat as well as in the follow-up email. And if you have any other questions about that, you know how to find me.
Awesome. Thank you, Nick. Thanks for your help with this. Thank you all. I appreciate your questions, your comments. Hope to see you all in our next facilitator training. And if you have any questions, anything further, please feel free to reach out.
Definitely. You'll see the email from me within the next 24 hours. You can always respond to that directly or shoot me an email. I'm nic@elimindset.com.
Awesome. All right.
Bye, all.
Excellent. Thank you all.
Thank you.